In this video, I'm going to explain three concepts: the constant or final variables, the shortcut math operator and assignment, and the for statement as a shortcut for the typical while. With these three features, you will not do anything completely new. They are just ways of doing things better or in a more simple way. They are used quite often, so it is necessary to know them. To explain this, I have prepared this little program. I have an initial amount, then an interest, and this interest is added 5 times in this loop, and finally I print the result here. Let's see things that I would like to change in this program. Let's talk first about constant or final variables. There are some variables like this one, interest, where we assigned a value once and then we never change it again in the whole program. So for some languages, there is a special way of indicating that this variable will never change. In JavaScript, instead of the keyword let, we use the keyword const. There are two advantages of that. First is that when we read this line, we already know that this variable will never change, so it helps us understand the program. The other advantage is that if we make a mistake and we try to update the variable, we will see an error. There is something funny about the idea of constant variables, because these two terms, constant and variable, they are basically opposite, they are incompatible. I think that nowadays the term variable is a bit obsolete because most variables never change. There is still another variable that we can declare as constant. This variable increment, once it is initialized, it is never changed. You may think that since this is a loop, in every iteration the variable is changed, but this is not the case. When a variable is declared inside a loop, it can be used from the moment it is declared until the end of the loop. And every time the loop is executed, the variable is declared again. Now I'm going to explain the shortcut math operator and assignment, like plus equal. These operators are used quite often. Every time we see that we are assigning a variable and we are using the same variable that we are assigning, we understand that what we want to do is change the variable, like increment in 1 unit in this case. So what we can do here is just remove the variable here, flip the symbols here, and this means that we want to add 1. Same thing with this statement. If we just write plus equal, it means that we want to add the increment value to the amount variable. We can use also other operators like to subtract, to multiply, to divide, and so on. In some programming languages, when we just want to add 1 unit to a variable, there is an even shorter shortcut, which is usually plus plus. In some languages, this shortcut is not available, so we have to keep the plus equal, which is available in most languages. Finally, I'm going to explain the for statement, which is a common replacement for the while statement. The for statement is often used as a shortcut for the typical while. What do I mean with typical while? For me, a typical while has 3 parts. First, a variable is initialized. Then, this variable is used in the condition of the while. And finally, this same variable is incremented or changed in some way. The while loop is very similar in all languages, but the for loop is usually different. Let's see how it is done in JavaScript. First, we replace the while keyword for the for keyword. Then we move the initialization to inside the parentheses of the for loop. Here, I'm keeping the semicolon too. And finally, I will move also the increment of this variable to also inside the parentheses. I'm writing first a semicolon here and then the statement, but I'm removing the final semicolon because I already wrote it here. So the for loop in JavaScript has the initialization, the condition, and the increment inside the parentheses. We have removed two statements, so it is a little bit shorter than the while statement. Our program is now doing exactly the same as before, as you can see here. Let's see the same concepts in Java. In Java, constant variables are called final variables, and we actually use this keyword, final, in front of the variable to declare it as final or constant. We cannot use it in the amount variable because it's changed here, so we see an error. About the shortcut, it is exactly the same as in JavaScript. It's plus equal, and here too. In Java also we have the plus plus shortcut when we just want to increment 1. Now for the for statement, it is exactly the same as in JavaScript. We move the initialization of the variable here and then the increment of the variable at the end, also removing the final semicolon. And we can see that the result of the program is the same as before. Let's see now Kotlin. In Kotlin, the final variables are declared with the keyword val. So it is quite short and convenient. Var for variable and val for value. We can also declare this increment variable as a value. The shortcut math operator and assignment, it is the same as in Java and JavaScript, so plus equal here and plus equal here. In Kotlin, we can also use the plus plus operator. The for loop in Kotlin is a little bit different and simpler. We write for, but then we decide the range of numbers that we want to go. For example, if we want to go from 1 to 5, we write in 1 ... 5. This will loop from 1 to 5. Now we don't need this declaration and this increment. We don't need to declare I as a variable. Actually, we cannot do it. It is implicitly a variable. The result of the program is exactly the same as before. I want to point out that the numbers that you see here in the loops, in Java also, for example, or in JavaScript. Oh, I forgot that I could also use the plus plus operator here. Okay, I was saying that the numbers that you're using in the loops, they could come from variables or other expressions. For example, let's see, I declare a variable, a final variable a and a b, 1 and 5, and I can use these variables here, a and b. So they don't need to be exactly explicit numbers. Let's see Python now. As you remember, in Python you don't declare the variables, so there is no way to declare them as final. About the shortcut, it is exactly the same as before. It is plus equal here and also here, plus equal. In Python you cannot use the plus plus operator, so you need to use plus equal 1. The for operator is different, but is similar to Kotlin because you also specify the range. So we write for I in and then the range as in Kotlin, but in this case we use the word range, which is a special keyword in Python. And we write range from 1 to 6 because actually the last number, the number 6, is not used. So this will loop from 1 to 5. If we just want to repeat this thing 5 times, we could just write 5. When we write only one number, it actually means from 0 to 5, which is actually from 0 to 4. So it will loop 5 times. In this case, we just care about the number of times, not the numbers themselves. As you can see, the result of the program is the same as before. In Ruby, as in Python, you don't declare the variables, so you cannot declare them as constant. The shortcut to update a variable is exactly the same, plus equal in this case, and as in Python, you cannot use the plus plus shortcut. The for loop is very similar to Kotlin, so I will copy the for loop in Kotlin to Ruby. The only difference is that in Ruby you don't need to write the parentheses. but the rest is the same. You can see that the result of the program is the same as before. I want to mention this concept of ranges, which is present in Ruby, Kotlin, and also in Python. The interesting thing about this is that you could extract these ranges into a variable. For example, I could declare a variable RNG, for example. I don't want to use the word range because it's the keyword, and use the variable in the loop. The same thing, I can do it in Ruby. I can declare a range, assign the range that I want, and use it in the loop. The interesting thing about having the range into a variable is that, for example, you could pass it as an argument to a function, you could keep it as a property in a class, and many other things.